How did ancient humans tell time before clocks? Picture this. You wake up, reach for your phone to check the time, and it's gone. Not dead, not lost. Gone, like it never existed. No alarm, no lock screen, no little number in the corner quietly judging you for how much of the day you've already burned. Now picture living your entire life like that. No calendar app buzzing at you about a meeting you already regret agreeing to. No running 5 minutes late texts, because there is no 5 minutes. There's just light. And the terrifying sense that you might be doing everything wrong. You open your eyes. The light outside is pale and thin. The air has that morning bite. Somebody's messing with a fire nearby. Birds are starting their nonsense in the trees. Is it 6 a.m.? 8 a.m.? You have no idea. And here's the plot twist. A.m. doesn't exist yet either. Neither does Monday. Nobody has ever said, let's meet at 3 in the history of the species, because 3 doesn't mean anything. And somehow, this is the part that should bother you. Everything still runs on schedule. People know exactly when to break camp, when to hunt, when to sit tight, when the river's about to turn nasty, and when winter stops being a rumor and starts being a threat. They plan trips, harvests, weddings, migrations, funerals, all without a single ticking device anywhere on the continent. To modern brains, raised on push notifications, that sounds impossible, which says less about ancient humans and more about us. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't actually read time anymore. We just receive it, pre-chewed, in the form of numbers and buzzes and little red dots that ruin your mood before you've even opened the app. Ancient people didn't get that service. They had to notice time before it had a name, in shadows, in hunger, in moonlight, in the smell of rain, in a bird coming back from wherever birds go. Before time was something you glanced at, it was something you watched. And if you watched badly, nature didn't send a follow-up email. Nature sent frost, or starvation, or darkness while you were still an hour from camp and very much regretting your life choices. So how did people figure out what time it was with 0 clocks, 0 calendars, and 0 apps to remind them they exist? Simple. They weren't guessing, they were reading. And the first page of that book was written across the sky. The sun was the obvious answer, but obvious is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Yes, it rises, crosses the sky, disappears. Background noise to us, the kind of thing we only notice when the weather app lies. But to people whose survival depended on daylight, warmth, and timing, the sun wasn't background. It was basically a giant, free, extremely reliable piece of equipment that never needed batteries. Its path shifts across the year. Where it rises, crawls along the horizon. Days stretch, days shrink. Shadows swing around like a slow, silent second hand. None of it happens fast, which means you needed patience to catch it. And honestly, patience might be the original human technology, several thousand years before anyone invented the wheel or the group chat. Stand in one spot long enough, keep watching sunrise after sunrise, and the horizon starts behaving like a calendar. The sun doesn't rise in the same place every morning. It drifts to an extreme point, then turns around and comes back. That drift marks the turning of the year. No paper, no app, just staring at the same patch of sky for years like a very committed hobbyist. Eventually, people got tired of just watching and started building. Stonehenge in England, Newgrange in Ireland, famous today mostly because they look exactly like the kind of place where a documentary narrator drops his voice an octave and starts talking about ancient mysteries. But strip away the mood lighting, and these are just really, really precise solar instruments made of rock. Newgrange lines up with the winter solstice sunrise. Stonehenge lines up with the summer one. People with no computers, no telescopes, and absolutely no Wi-Fi built structures that could nail a specific sunrise on a specific day every single year for millennia. Let that sink in for a second. That's not primitive guesswork. That's observation that got so precise it turned into engineering. Of course, most people didn't need a several-ton stone monument just to know when to head home before dark. For that, they had a much cheaper piece of tech, a stick in the ground. Stick it upright, watch what happens. Morning shadow stretches long one way. By midday, it shrinks down to almost nothing. Later, it stretches out the other direction as the sun drops. Do this daily and the pattern burns itself into memory. The sundial wasn't invented so much as it was noticed, probably by accident, by someone bored and staring at their own shadow. And once that habit was locked in, you didn't even need the stick anymore. You could read your own shadow, the color of the light, the heat on your skin, the sun ducking behind a hill. You wouldn't know the minute, but nobody needed the minute. Needing the exact minute is a very modern, very unnecessary form of anxiety. Ancient people needed a different kind of precision, and it looked more like, is there enough daylight left to make it home? Is it safe to keep working? Should we turn back now? Is darkness about to catch us somewhere we really don't want to be? Not decorative knowledge. Timekeeping wired straight into whether you made it home. The day wasn't cut into numbers, it was cut into risk. And then, once the sun went down, a second clock clocked in for the night shift, the moon. The sun gives you days, and with enough patience, seasons. But humans needed something in the middle, bigger than one sunrise, smaller than an entire year. It fills up, fades out, vanishes, comes back. Nature's original monthly subscription, and unlike yours, you can't cancel it or forget you're paying for it. The whole cycle runs about 29.5 days. No writing required, no math, not even good eyesight. Just a clear sky and the willingness to actually look up, which, let's be honest, is already asking a lot of most of us today. And ancient humans had plenty of reasons to bother looking. A full moon changes everything: travel, hunting, night work, safety, whatever ceremony you had planned. A pitch-black, moonless night is basically a different planet. The moon's rise and fall gave people a shared rhythm everyone could track, remember, and plan around. No group chat required. There are ancient bones out there, scratched with row after row of notches, and some researchers think they might be early counting tools, possibly, maybe, tentatively, lunar tallies. And to be clear, this is still debated, and it should be. Not every scratch on a bone is a secret Ice Age calendar. Sometimes a scratch is just a scratch some guy made because he was bored 20,000 years ago. But if even a handful of those marks really were tracking the moon, that's wild, because it means people weren't just experiencing time anymore. They were starting to save it outside their own skulls. A notched bone doesn't look impressive behind museum glass. It doesn't loom over a landscape like Stonehenge. It doesn't glow. It doesn't beep. It definitely doesn't sink to the cloud. But in the right hands, it was a memory device with exactly one job: don't lose count. Long before cities, before farming, before kings, before quarterly reports and Sunday night dread about Monday, somebody, somewhere, was already carving time into bone. And then there's the clock nobody had to build at all, because it came pre-installed: your own body. Every human runs on an internal rhythm, roughly 24 hours long, shaped by light, hormones, temperature, hunger, and fatigue. We slap a clean, clinical label on it: circadian rhythm, like it's some tidy little biological subscription service humming along perfectly in the background. In reality, modern humans treat their circadian rhythm the way they treat a smoke detector: something to silence, not obey. We stare into phone screens at 1 a.m. We set alarms and drag ourselves out of sleep mid-negotiation. We drink coffee like it's a constitutional right, work night shifts, eat dinner at 11, and then act genuinely betrayed when our brain won't switch off on command. Ancient people weren't living some wellness retreat fantasy either. Nobody was doing breathwork next to a waterfall while a saber-toothed cat watched from the bushes. But their days were locked much more tightly to actual light, heat, cold, hunger, and exhaustion. The body helped keep time because the body was soaked in the same cycles as everything around it. Energy climbs, heat builds, hunger shows up uninvited, tiredness creeps in like an unwanted guest. The air cools, darkness rewrites the rules. For most everyday decisions, that was plenty. Nobody needed to know it was 2:17 p.m. They needed to know, is my body ready to move? Is the light going to hold? Should I eat, rest, push on, or quit while I'm ahead? But days and months were the easy part. The year, that was the real boss level. A day announces itself loudly. The moon performs its whole show right there in the sky. The year, though, is sneaky. It hides inside tiny shifts, and by the time you notice the mistake, it's usually too late to fix it. Plant too early, frost wipes you out. Wait too long, the growing season runs out before your crop is ready. Miss the migration through the valley, winter just got meaner. Misjudge the river, and the flood that was supposed to feed your fields drowns them instead. So people stopped trusting any single signal and started stacking them. Sun, moon, stars, wind, rivers, insects, birds, migrations, plant growth, temperature swings, plus the accumulated memory of everyone who'd already lived through the same cycle a dozen times. Timekeeping wasn't one clock. It was a whole network, patched together out of whatever the sky and the ground happened to be saying that week. One of the sharpest examples of this comes from ancient Egypt, and it's almost annoyingly elegant. The star Sirius disappears from the sky for weeks, then reappears one morning right on schedule, and that reappearance kept lining up with the Nile flooding. A star shows up, and suddenly people know something about the river. The river tells them something about the soil. The soil tells them something about planting. Planting tells them whether they eat next year. One dot of light in the pre-dawn sky, and somehow that's the whole food chain's alarm clock. No spreadsheet, no calendar reminder, just stars back, get moving. Astronomy turned into farming. The sky became an early warning system, with 0 satellites and 0 apps involved. This wasn't superstition playing dress-up as science. It was repeated observation, hardened by generations into something you could actually predict. But not every calendar was carved in rock or written in stars. Some calendars were, quite literally, alive. Plants and animals handed people seasonal intel that no fixed date ever could. A flower blooming meant the soil had warmed up. A bird returning signaled a shift in weather or food supply. Insects showing up told you something about moisture and heat. Leaves dropping, frogs calling, fish moving, animals breeding. All of it was information, whether or not anyone wrote it down. To a modern eye, that just looks like scenery you'd scroll past. To someone living inside that world, it was data. And not the vague kind, the kind you'd stake your winter on. Researchers have documented indigenous seasonal calendars from many parts of the world built around exactly these shifts: plants, animals, weather, water, landscape. A lot of them don't even bother with 4 neat little seasons. Some track far more periods, each one defined by a sign the community actually trusted, which honestly might be smarter than the calendar hanging in your kitchen. A paper calendar has no idea if this year runs warmer than usual. It doesn't know if the rain showed up early, if the river rose late, if insects appeared ahead of schedule, or if the flowers bloomed 3 weeks too soon. It just sits there being generically correct. Living things, on the other hand, respond. Flowers respond to heat. Birds respond to food. Insects respond to moisture. Rivers respond to rain and snowmelt. A living calendar adjusts itself in real time, because it's made out of the exact same world it's trying to measure. That's the part people usually miss when they picture ancient timekeeping. Some vague montage of cavemen squinting at rocks, patiently waiting around for civilization to arrive and finally invent accuracy. In reality, a lot of these systems were absurdly sophisticated. Take the Maya, who apparently looked at one calendar and thought, why stop there? And ran 3 at once. A 260-day ritual calendar, a 365-day solar one, and the long count, built to track dates so far out they make our see you in 2030 plans look adorably short-term. The Babylonians went a different route: paperwork. For centuries, their astronomers wrote down everything the sky did: moon, planets, eclipses, night after night, generation after generation, with the kind of patience that would make most of us close the app, uninstall it, and throw the phone across the room. And here's the thing that gets lost in all of this. Ancient timekeeping was rarely one lone genius dramatically staring at the horizon while everyone else waited around for history to happen. It was a team sport, stretched across centuries. One generation noticed. The next one remembered it well enough not to screw it up. Somebody corrected the details, somebody else carved or sang the fix so it wouldn't get lost. And eventually, a kid who once got dragged along to just watch the horizon, it's important, grew up to be the elder repeating the exact same lecture to someone else's bored kid. Call it a chain of people quietly refusing to forget something. That chain is where prediction actually came from, not the pretty stone circles. The chain. Because for ancient people, time wasn't some abstract concept to muse about over coffee. It was survival information, full stop. Knowing when to plant could be the line between a harvest and a famine. Knowing when animals passed through meant meat, hides, fat, tools, clothing, an actual shot at surviving winter. Knowing when a river would flood could mean fertile new fields, or it could mean losing everything you owned in one night. Timekeeping was technology. It just didn't come with a screen. Fire leaves ash behind. Stone tools leave sharp edges. Buildings leave ruins. Timekeeping leaves weirder fingerprints. A stone lined up with sunrise, notches cut into bone, a ceremony pinned to a moon phase, a story told at exactly the right season, a route only taken once a certain bird shows back up. Some of the most important tools humans ever built weren't held in a hand at all. They were held in memory. And memory, unlike a phone, has to be shared to actually work. A calendar is useless if only one person understands it. If two groups plan to meet under a certain moon phase, both groups need to recognize that phase. If a ceremony depends on a star showing up, everyone needs to agree on what that star means. If a hunt depends on animal movement, that knowledge has to be trusted, repeated, and taught, not just known by one guy who might wander off a cliff. That takes more than watching the sky. It takes culture. Stories, songs, rituals, elders, warnings, in-jokes, habits, rules. The entire messy human system whose whole job is making sure that one guy's private observation doesn't die with him. Which, if you think about it, is exactly what a group chat does today. Except theirs ran on moon phases and had a 5,000-year uptime record. Modern people coordinate through timestamps and push notifications. Ancient people coordinated through moon phases, seasonal cues, remembered landmarks, and the plain behavior of the world around them. Not a worse system, a different one. And in the environment it grew up in, it worked exactly as well as it needed to. Maybe that's the real difference between modern time and ancient time. We treat time like a number on a screen. They mostly experienced it as a relationship between the sun and the horizon, the moon and the dark, a star and a river, a flower and the temperature, an insect and the rain, a memory and a promise passed down. So, one more time, how did ancient humans actually know what time it was? They listened to a world that never stopped giving them clues. They watched the sun carve up the day. They tracked the moon through its whole routine. They felt their own bodies rise and crash with light, heat, hunger, and exhaustion. They read stars, rivers, plants, animals, insects, weather, and landscape, and turned all of it into memory, then tradition, then something they could actually bet their lives on. Sometimes that knowledge turned into stone, sometimes bone, sometimes just a story told at the right moment. And sometimes it was a habit so ordinary that later generations barely noticed it counted as knowledge at all. The clock didn't invent timekeeping. It just made it possible to stop paying attention. The world hasn't gone quiet. It's still throwing out the same signals it always did. Sunrise angles, moon phases, birds showing up on cue. We just stopped bothering to check the messages. And maybe that's the actual twist here. Ancient timekeeping was never really about hours. It was about knowing a place intimately enough that it would warn you before it hurt you. In about 30 seconds, you'll close this video and check the time without thinking twice. Phone, watch, whatever's nearest. The answer shows up free, instantly, no observation required. For most of human history, people had to earn that same answer. By watching shadows move, moons change, stars vanish and return, rivers rise, flowers open, animals shift with the seasons. They built an entire invisible clock out of a world that was talking to them the whole time. And the impressive part was never that they could hear it. It's that most of us couldn't anymore, even if our lives depended on it. Which, for about 200,000 years, they did. So, everything goes dark tomorrow. Every clock, every phone, every app. Would you still know what time it is? Or would you just be standing there, staring at the sun, waiting for it to buffer?